What I, there's a big question in NBA circles right now that a lot of fans are contemplating and talking about, which is not necessarily a new topic, but it is something that constantly gets attention, and some things have been done to change this ideology as of recently in the last 5 to 10 years in the league, but it's still prevalent. What I'm talking about is quote unquote tanking. And the question is tanking good for the NBA as a whole? This is a pretty multi layered question, but I think overall it is. The reason I think tanking is not just good, but honestly necessary in the NBA is because the way the league operates, it's not good for a team to be in what I'll call the middle range of the league. So those are teams that are at the low end of the playoffs. They're just barely getting a spot. Maybe they're a play-in team. And even teams that are, maybe the sixth seed that are just having a good season but really don't have good players. Maybe they made it to the playoffs on a fluke. Maybe this isn't really something that is really going to be manageable or foreseeable with the same group that a particular team has going into the future. And a lot of people refer to that online as basketball purgatory, because you're in this constant state of mediocrity. I, for one, experienced this with the team that I'm a fan of, the Washington Wizards, for a long time, where we kind of held on to Bradley Beal after John Wall went down, and then we eventually traded John Wall and got back Russell Westbrook. And that season where we had Russell Westbrook, we wound up making the playoffs. I believe as an 8 seed, either the 8 or the 7. And I believe we played the 76ers in the first round. And I think we got swept, or maybe we got one win, but everyone kind of knew, like, okay, this team isn't really going to make it. And I think the players know on some level, and then they just don't have the confidence to go out and even play, or at least play winning basketball. So what helps teams and what helps fan bases is you need to either be in contention, which I would say at this point is probably your top 6 team in the league. There's really only 4 to 6 teams every year that you can really consider true title contenders. And, so you want to either be in that range or you want to be in the bottom 6 teams of the league. Because if you're constantly getting the 10th to 14th pick, sure, that might turn out well for you, but you have to be lucky. You really need top 5 picks to build a franchise up, and especially for not major market teams, like the Grizzlies or the Spurs or other teams that don't really get a lot of free agents to come there unless they're already winning. It's just tough to build up a team anyway besides the draft. So if you're the Lakers or you're the Clippers or you're the Celtics or the Knicks or the Brooklyn Nets, like, these are major markets. Not even talking about basketball. People want to live in Los Angeles or Southern California. People want to live in New York or Brooklyn, Boston, plenty of places. You could include the Miami Heat as well, maybe even the Orlando Magic. And a lot of players are now making more decisions to sign contracts in states that don't have state income tax. So you see a lot more players going to places like Dallas, Houston, San Antonio, Miami, Orlando, or the Grizzlies. So there's just a bunch of factors that kind of dictate what players are going to do. So for a team that is not in a state where there's, lower or no state income tax, and you're not a premier market like Los Angeles, what are you going to do? Like, take the Charlotte Hornets, for example. The Charlotte Hornets have been terrible for, I don't even know how long. It's ever since they were the Bobcats. They have made the playoffs maybe a handful of times, but they've always been in that mediocre range. They've never been a title contender in probably the last 20 years. So you really need to build through the draft, right? Because, look, they got LaMelo Ball. That's probably the best player they've had in their franchise history. I mean, the only other player that I can remember being really, really good for Charlotte was Gerald Wallace, Corey Maggette. There was a couple, but LaMelo is definitely better than them. And LaMelo could probably do a lot more for you and actually get you into a position where you're playing winning basketball. He just needs to stay healthy, and you need to surround him with more high picks. They just got that guy out of France, Salone. So, they're growing and they're improving the roster. That's not even to mention Brandon Miller, but, Brandon Miller, number 2 overall pick. So you have to stockpile these high draft picks, and that's how you have to build your team in a lot of situations. So would I say that you necessarily need to tank? I wouldn't necessarily use that terminology, but I do think it's important for NBA teams that don't have a shot at truly winning, that it's better for them to play young players that might not necessarily know how to win yet, and let them grow and develop and play, meaningful basketball on the NBA level. It might not be meaningful in terms of winning, but they're going to get reps up and they're going to get better. And even if they're losing, despite getting these reps up, that's better for the team anyway. That's honestly what most of these GMs and owners, I think, want at the end of the day if they're in that position. So I think it's become a lot more realistic, of an expectation for NBA teams to kind of think about what their chances are during the off season, and then once they get to the season, you fill it out for the first 2 to 3 months, and then if you're not really doing well by the deadline, I think it's probably safe to say that you should probably let your young players develop and play as much as they want, and don't worry about winning. And that's crazy to say, because the whole point of any sports league is for teams to try and win. So it sounds very contradictory to say you need to lose in order to win long term. But that's kind of just how the league is set up. And tanking is a little bit harder now. I mean, they changed what used to be a 25% chance for the worst team in the league to get the number 1 overall pick. Now, the bottom 3 teams, unless there's some sort of tiebreaker, all have the same percentage to get the number 1 overall pick, which I believe is 14%. So it makes it a little bit more difficult. But at least if you're getting into that top 5 range, you're making progress. But it really shows. Like, think about if the Detroit Pistons had gotten the number 1 pick both last year and this year's draft. They would have Victor Wembanyama, Cade Cunningham, and either Alex Sarr or Zachary Risache, or maybe even Reed Shepherd, who knows. But that's completely different than getting the 5th pick this year and getting Ron Holland, and getting the 5th pick last year and getting Asar Thompson. Those are still both really good players, but I think the point is that being the worst team is going to still give you the best chance to get high draft picks. Even if it is the 5th pick overall, that's still going to be valuable. Any top 5 pick is going to be valuable. But I do think tanking on some level is just good for the NBA in general. Like, it allows for the winning teams to see that there's a new generation of players coming in, and players, I think, that are coming into the league now that are 17, 18, 19 years old, they're really good. Like, I don't know if it's the level of training that kids are getting growing up now and how big of a focus it is to work on your, ball handling skills and your guard skills. Even if you're a 7-footer, there's just so much more development that's going on for younger players. So I think the talent coming into the league is just going to continue to grow and grow and grow. And it's going to be good for teams that aren't in major markets because they're not really going to be able to attract free agents, but they're going to get these high draft picks that are hopefully going to turn into star players, at least all-star players. So I do think it's a necessary element to the league. And as much as people want to get upset about it, like me personally, being a Wizards fan, I didn't want the Wizards to win this year. Like, I liked seeing them play winning basketball, and I didn't want them to be the worst team in the league. But I think the best position you can be in when you're in a rebuild like this, especially in year one, you really need to try to be in that bottom 3 range. If you're bottom 5, okay, cool. I mean, you saw the Hawks win, and I think they had the 10th worst odds. So it's really unpredictable. But you want to be in a range where you're giving yourself a good chance to come away with, a top 3 pick. I think a top 3 pick is usually pretty safe to say that that's going to at least help you slightly. And if it doesn't even help you that much in terms of winning, at least that's another valuable asset that you can flip into something else. But the way to come into, I guess, value naturally in the league now is to lose on some level, and collect draft picks and build your team up that way with young players, because young talent will always be worth something in the league. And if the guy has potential, other teams probably going to see it too. So while it might be rough as a fan to see your team, put out poor lineups because they just want to kind of rack up the L's, just know that it's meant for a bigger purpose, and you'll probably enjoy that much more in the long term than you would if your team's constantly the 8th seed and getting knocked out in the first round. Tanking is inevitable, and it's definitely here to stay. But it's not the worst thing in the world, and it's about time that fans of the NBA and fans of the league embrace it and see it as a healthy transition from one state of a team to the rebirth of the team and bringing in new young talent that could possibly lead you to places that your team has never been.